What if your faith wasn't just a belief, but a death sentence? What if following Jesus meant not just leaving everything behind, but giving everything up, even your life? In the heart of ancient Rome, where crosses lined the horizon and the smell of burning flesh filled the air, one man faced that choice. His name was Peter. He wasn't the polished hero we often imagine. He was impulsive, broken, and at times afraid. He sank when he doubted. He slept when he should have prayed. He denied Jesus not once, but 3 times, and yet Jesus called him the Rock, not because of what he was, but because of what grace could make him. Now that grace was calling him again, not to preach, not to walk on water, but to die. It was the year 64 AD. Rome was in flames, literally. A massive fire swept through the city, destroying homes, temples, and palaces. Whispers spread like smoke. Had Emperor Nero started the fire himself to make way for his new vision of the city, Nero needed a scapegoat, someone to blame, someone the crowds already distrusted. He found them in the Christians, those strange followers of a crucified man from Galilee who refused to bow to Caesar. The persecution began swiftly. Believers were rounded up, tortured, thrown to wild beasts, burned alive. And at the center of this growing movement, the authorities found one man, Peter. They came for him at night. Roman guards stormed the small Christian gathering. No one resisted. They were people of peace. Peter, already advanced in years, raised no protest. He looked into the terrified eyes of the younger believers around him and whispered words of peace. "Let not your hearts be troubled." Some begged him to run to hide. "You are our shepherd," they said. "If they take you, who will lead us?" But Peter shook his head. He had fled once before, after the rooster crowed. He would not flee again. As he slipped through the shadows of the Roman streets, planning his escape, something happened that would change everything. A man appeared walking in the opposite direction towards the burning city. Peter stopped. His heart froze. He knew that walk. He knew that face. It was Jesus, not in vision or dream, but in a moment more real than stone. Peter fell to his knees and asked, "Lord, where are you going?" And Jesus replied, "I go to Rome to be crucified again." In that instant, Peter knew. The call to follow Jesus had never ended. It still meant carrying a cross, still meant laying down your life. He turned back toward the city, not to escape death, but to embrace it. The arrest was swift. The sentence was clear. Death by crucifixion. Rome's most brutal form of execution reserved for rebels and the lowest of criminals. But Peter had one final request. "Crucify me upside down," he said. "I am not worthy to die as my Lord did." The guards mocked him. They didn't understand. But they agreed. The crowd that gathered didn't cheer. Something about this man, so calm, so resolute, silenced even the loudest voices. Peter touched the rough wood of the cross and kissed it. This wasn't defeat. This was glory. They flipped the cross. They stretched out his arms. They nailed his feet, bound his wrists. And as they lifted him, the sky turned crimson. Hanging upside down, the world blurred. Pain rushed to his head. Blood dripped into the dirt. But Peter did not cry out in agony. He prayed, not for deliverance, but for the city, for Rome, for the very men who had nailed him, for the young church watching from the shadows. His last breath wasn't a gasp, it was a gift. Peter the fisherman had become the shepherd. The man who once denied Jesus now declared him with his blood. And as his heart slowed as the light faded, Peter saw not the faces of the crowd, but the face of Christ, waiting, smiling, welcoming him home. No thrones, no choirs, no dramatic light from heaven, just the quiet fulfillment of a promise. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. His body would fall, but his legacy would rise. That upside-down cross became a symbol of humility and surrender, and his death became seed that would sprout in the catacombs of Rome, in the hearts of martyrs, in the whispers of underground churches, in the fire of revival centuries later. Peter didn't die because he lost. He died because he followed. to the very end, and in that end he found the beginning. Now the question echoes through time, across oceans, through screens and pews and hearts. Would you follow him there? Would you still believe if it cost you everything? Are you ready not just to live for Christ, but to die for him? Peter was not perfect, but he was faithful, and his cross, though upside down, points us upward. The sun was just beginning to rise over the jagged rooftops of Rome when the guards returned. Their footsteps echoed through the narrow corridors of the Mamertine prison, where darkness clung to the walls like a second skin. In the corner of the damp cell, Peter sat in chains, but his face was not the face of a prisoner. It was the face of a man already free, free from fear, free from this world, free to die well. He knew the time had come. He had heard the rumors, felt the shift in the air. The empire had made its decision. The sentence would be carried out today. Crucifixion. The same kind of death his Lord endured, but not the same posture. Peter had made a request that startled even his executioners. "Turn the cross upside down," he said. "I am not worthy to die in the same way as my Savior." It wasn't for show. It wasn't for sympathy. It was reverence, a statement of love, a final act of humility from the man who once argued about who was greatest. That man was gone. In his place stood someone reborn by grace and forged in suffering. As they led him through the streets, Peter didn't tremble. The morning crowd was smaller than usual, some still waking, others quietly watching from shaded corners. A few recognized him and whispered behind cloaks, "Is that him? The fisherman from Galilee, the one they say walked on water?" The path to execution was familiar. So many had walked it. Thieves, zealots, rebels, innocents. Today it was Peter's turn. But he didn't walk as a criminal. He walked as a disciple. Each step was a sermon, each breath a hymn. Outside the city gates, the place of death waited. A hill bare and cruel where wood met flesh and blood met dust. The Roman soldiers moved with routine efficiency. For them, it was just another crucifixion, another body, another warning to the masses. But Peter made them pause. Before the hammer struck, he looked up not to the sky, but to the earth, because he would be looking at it upside down in his final hours. And then he prayed. Not for himself, not for mercy, but for the world. "Father," he whispered, "may this death bring glory to your Son. May my blood water the seeds he planted. May this be the moment they remember not me, but him." They tied his arms to the beam, nailed his feet, and lifted the cross upside down. Gravity pulled the blood to his head, distorting vision, quickening pain. It was agony, but not despair. It was torment, but not defeat. Upside down, Peter saw the world differently. Rome wasn't invincible. Nero wasn't eternal. The empire's glory was fleeting, but Christ's kingdom unshakable, everlasting. Near, he could see the faces. The Roman guards hardened and indifferent. The believers hiding behind rocks, eyes wide with grief. The children clinging to their mothers, the sky turning pale. And then he began to speak. No one knows every word he said. Some say he quoted the Psalms. Others remember fragments of blessing and courage. One thing they all agree on, he sang. Hanging upside down in excruciating pain, Peter sang. Songs of Zion, songs of the shepherd, songs of the cross. And then came silence, not from him, but from the crowd. Something sacred was happening. This was not just an execution. This was worship. This was testimony. This was glory in the face of horror. Peter didn't ask why. He already knew. He didn't cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Because he knew he had not been forsaken. He had been found, called, loved, restored. This cross, this final humiliation was not a curse, it was a crown. His mind drifted. He saw the Sea of Galilee, the boat, the nets. He heard the voice calling him the first time, "Follow me." He remembered the moment he first realized who Jesus was. "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." He remembered his failure and the forgiveness that followed. He remembered the fire, the denial, the tears, and then breakfast by the sea. "Do you love me? Yes, Lord. Feed my sheep." Now the shepherd was giving his last breath for the flock. His voice weakened, his body grew cold, but his spirit remained strong. As his final breath approached, a strange peace filled the air. The wind stilled, the birds fell silent, even the mocking voices disappeared. Peter opened his eyes one last time, and he saw him, not in vision, not in dream, but in promise. Jesus stood not in pain, but in glory. Not on a cross, but on a throne, arms wide open, eyes filled with fire and love. The same look he gave Peter when he was sinking. The same look he gave when he said, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." And then, silence. Peter was gone, but not forgotten. His upside-down death turned the world right side up. The cross stood still long after Peter's final breath had left him. His body limp and broken hung inverted over the scorched earth. To the world, it was over. Another execution, another troublemaker erased. Rome went on with its day. The soldiers moved on to their next orders. The crowd dispersed. But heaven had marked the moment, and something had shifted. Because while Rome thought it had silenced a man, God had just commissioned a message. The blood that dripped from Peter's upside-down body didn't just stain the ground, it seeded it. Every drop whispered what swords could never cut through, that Christ is worth everything, even your life, especially your life. The early believers didn't forget. They couldn't. Many had seen it. Some had heard his final words. Others simply felt the tremor in their spirit that something divine had happened on that hill. In the days that followed, they returned to the place where Peter had died. Quietly, reverently, they prayed, they wept, they sang, and then they preached. Not just about Peter, but about the Christ he followed. And something miraculous began to grow. They didn't have cathedrals. They didn't have choirs. They didn't even have legal protection. But they had courage, fire, conviction. Peter's death lit a fuse that no emperor could extinguish. In dark rooms lit by candles, they told stories. Not myths, not legends, but memories. "I was there," one would whisper. "I saw him face the cross without fear. He prayed for the men who nailed him. He smiled even in death." And that's when the church grew, not because of power, but because of persecution. Not because they won arguments, but because they lost everything for Christ and counted it joy. Generations later, long after Nero was dust and Rome's grandeur faded into ruin, Peter's name was still spoken, not as a victim, but as a victor. A man who had denied Christ, yes, but a man who had been restored by grace. A man who finished the race. His bones, tradition says, were buried on Vatican Hill. Over time, a small shrine was built, then a chapel, then a basilica. Today, St. Peter's Basilica stands as one of the most iconic landmarks in the world. But the real monument isn't built with stone or gold. It's built with souls. Men and women who heard Peter's story and said, if he could follow Jesus that far, so can I. He became more than a martyr. He became a mirror, showing us what it means to fall and rise, to doubt and believe, to run and return, to follow Jesus not just in the triumphs, but in the trials. Peter's life teaches us that faith isn't about never failing. It's about never quitting, even when you're sinking, even when you're scared, even when the cross is upside down, especially then, because when you follow Jesus that far, when you love him more than your own comfort, your own future, your own life, you find something the world can't take from you, eternity. Peter saw it, not with perfect vision, but with perfect surrender. And today that call still goes out. Not just to Rome, not just to pastors or missionaries, but to you, to all of us. Follow me. So not when it's easy, not when it's popular, but when it costs you something, maybe everything. Because the gospel isn't safe. It's dangerous. It will wreck your plans. It will flip your world upside down. And in doing so, it will save you. Peter didn't set out to be a hero. He wasn't fearless. He wasn't flawless. He just refused to turn back, even when it meant dying in reverse. So when you see the cross, remember it's not just about Jesus dying for you. It's about you living and maybe even dying for him. That's what Peter did. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. Because love like that doesn't run, it kneels, it bleeds, it finishes. And somewhere in heaven, there's a fisherman with a scarred soul and a healed heart, waiting to welcome those who said yes to the same call. Not perfect people, just faithful ones. The kind who understand that sometimes the only way to truly follow Christ is upside down.